Good morning. My name is Michael Conley. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations of the North Reading Public Schools. And today I'm going to cover a presentation on the status of our FY24 preliminary school budget. I'm going to try to touch upon some of our kind of challenges. What are the drivers in the school budget? What are some of our budget priorities? What are the new staffing positions that we are recommending? What are some of our budget offsets, revenue offsets, and then to conclude, what can we conclude from the school budget? So if we look at some of our challenges, if we start at kind of the macro level, it's always a challenge when funding a school municipal budget because there always seems to be this kind of structural deficit that does exist. So certainly fixed cost items like health insurance and cost of benefits and other costs do rise on an annual basis much greater than what we're able to raise through Proposition 2.5. So right from the beginning, there's always you have high fixed costs that are growing exponentially greater than what a municipality is able to bring in through revenue. There are other school revenue options like user fees and grants and different areas where we also offset and subsidize the budget, but those revenue options are generally fairly limited. Then there's other school high costs like our contractual obligations. We've had high inflationary increases for supplies, materials, technology, and shipping costs. Our building maintenance costs have gone up significantly these last few years as well. So we have a situation where fixed costs grow at a much higher rate generally than the revenue that we're bringing in. So in funding a school budget, it does create this sort of structural deficit. And then we have our special education costs, which generally have been uncertain and they're difficult to predict, which presents a further challenge. These are the revenue sources of a school budget. 74%, not uncommon, would make up the largest piece of the revenue generated from the local property taxes. State aid from Chapter 70 formula and unrestricted government aid make up the next largest piece of the pie. Local receipts, areas like permits fees, licensing fees, meals tax, excise tax, make up the next piece, 7.3%. And then for the schools, we do have revenue generated from the user fees for some of our optional programs, and we have federal and state grants. So all these sources make up our revenue. If you look at the budget drivers, there's four major budget drivers at play in fiscal 24. Our contractual salary obligations are funds that are included to meet all of our required obligations to fund our professional and support staff's contracts. It's not uncommon that personnel services make up about 83% of a school department budget, and that is the case. So these funds include funds to fund cost of living adjustments, costs for certain lane movement, step increases, and other contractual increases for our professional and support staff. But that's always going to be a big driver of the school budget. Our operational fixed costs, we have many fixed costs. We continue to modify our building maintenance and custodial service line items to keep pace with our actual expenditures in the areas of HVAC maintenance, plumbing, boiler repair, landscaping, grounds, wastewater treatment facility, our busing, our utility rates. All these need to be adjusted on an ongoing basis, and it's certainly a driver of the school budget. Next is what's known as NRPS 2025. That is our strategic plan. So we are recommending some new initiatives, some enhancements, and some new positions, which I'll get into in a moment at a next slide, but that is a big driver of the budget. And then we have our special education costs, which is a driver of this year's budget. We have our out-of-district tuition line, which is going up significantly due to several factors, new students being educated outside the district, or an increase in the number of students being educated outside the district, as well as the private day tuition rates are increasing by 14% next year, and that's a rate that's set by the Operational Services Division, and the average increase is typically 2.5%, but for next year, they're doing an increase at high as 14%, which has been certainly a driver of this budget for fiscal 24. If you get into the numbers, you can kind of see that we are requesting a 5.8% increase over fiscal 23. That's a little more than $2 million increase. These are the expense categories we've generally looked at the budget for. The FY24 budget of $37,768,204 is the total budget request. And you can kind of see some of those budget drivers at play when you look at these increases. How are the funds being spent? So if we look at the breakdown of these expense categories, certainly I mentioned earlier, salaries and compensation make up the largest piece. That's always going to be the case in school department budget at 83%. We then have our tuition line, which is the next biggest piece. That's to fund students being educated outside the district at 6%. Contractual services, supplies and materials make up the next largest piece of the pie. If you look at sort of the functional categories, certainly our instructional services, our student services are making up the largest piece of the pie. That should always be the case. That's funds being spent directly on the classroom, teachers, materials, technology areas, and student support services, health services are all in those categories. And those should always, in the school department budget, make up the largest piece of the pie. These are the new staffing positions that I spoke of briefly earlier. So we certainly are proposing 3.5 staffing positions, certainly driven by our strategic plan known as NRPS 2025. But the first one is a STEM coordinator, and this is an administrative position that would assist school principals in providing support in the areas of curriculum, instruction, assessment, administration, and supervision and evaluation. The coordinators also would work closely with the assistant superintendent of teaching and learning to meet all of our goals in these related areas. The school adjustment counselor at the elementary level will allow for a designated adjustment counselor at each elementary school. Currently, there is a designated adjustment counselor at the Batchelor Elementary School and a shared counselor at the Hood and the Little Elementary Schools. So this would allow us to get to the model that we're hoping to achieve and have a designated adjustment counselor at every school across the district. It's an extremely impactful one at all levels. It allows for us to be more responsive and proactive rather than reactive to address the social and emotional needs of all students. The next request is a 1.5 request of academic interventionist. This would be a 1.0 position shared by the 3 elementary schools and a 0.5 position shared at the middle school. This would allow for a full-time academic interventionist between all 3 schools. This would be sort of an enhancement over the tutoring model that we have currently at the elementary schools, and will provide for support in a more progressive early intervention approach with students at all levels, but particularly in grades 1 and 2, with a focus on math. And at the middle school, it would provide that support necessary in grades 6 through 8, with a focus on literacy at the middle school. So all in all, this is a $303,785 increase to the FY24 preliminary budget request. I just want to remind everyone that we do have positions that are being funded as part of our ESSER grant, and that's the Emergency School Relief Funding Grant through COVID-19 pandemic. That grant is coming near the end of its term. In fiscal 24, next year would mark the end of these funds that are available. But these 4 positions are funded in this grant, and the plan is continued to do so next year in fiscal 24. But we will need to come to a kind of decision point as we approach the end of next year on these positions, and the plan would be that these are certainly needed and necessary, and we would be rolling these into the fiscal 25 operating budget. So if you look at sort of a summary of where we stand, just really, we are requesting a general fund budget of $37,768,204. That is a little bit over a $2 million increase. Grants and revolving funds are showing here, so a little bit of an increase of what our offsets are. What's driving that is the special education circuit breaker account. So if you look at all of our funds, we're requesting the town support a little over $37.7 million, but in reality, because of grants and revolving funds and school committee accepted donations and PTO and PTA budgets of their in-kind gifts and enrichment programs and class field trips that they help support, the total fund amount for the school department budget is much greater than that, well over $41 million. Here's just a breakdown, looking at it a little different way, between salaries and expenses and what those offsets are and what the net request is to the town to support. But again, $37,768,204 is what the request is. Here's just a little bar graph that sort of shows the funding sources in the school budget in terms of the total funds. So you certainly have the general fund and the special revenue fund amounts that make up this North Reading student experience and the funding level that I just spoke to. You have general fund being supported by the local contribution, taxes, local receipts, Chapter 78, state aid, and then our special revenue funds, our federal grants, our state grants, revenue coming in from our revolving funds for our user fees that we do charge, and then we do receive gifts and donations as well from the PTOs, PTAs, and our support groups. So a quick snapshot of what the user fees are, what are the direct costs, and some of these optional programs that we do assess a user fee or a tuition for, and then what is the percentage of that revenue being brought in and how much that revenue is supporting. So bus transportation, athletics, extracurricular activities, performing arts, the kindergarten, full-day kindergarten program, and the preschool program are all part of programs that we assess a user fee or a tuition cost for. And the user fee contribution and the percentage amounts really, because we have not increased user fees and no one wants to do that, that user fee contribution and the cost that it's supporting has gone down. For each program, at one point in time, we were at 50% of a user fee contribution covering that direct cost amount. And now, as you can see across the board, we're much lower than that, annually averaging about 32%. Here's a history of our operating budget requests and what's been funded and supported by the town. So at one point in time, the 10-year average is 3.65%. The request on the table for fiscal 24 is 5.8%. So certainly above the annual average that's been supported, but there are a variety of reasons involving just the special education tuition rate increase, number one, and other factors due to inflationary and supply and material increases that are really at work here, that it's making a request much higher at this point. If you look at what can we conclude from the budget, well, the FY24 budget really are funds that is a budget that allows us to meet our contractual obligations with employees and employee unions. It allows us to meet our fixed operational cost increases for contractual services, busing, utilities, etc. And then it maintains and adds staff to maintain the educationally sound student-teacher ratios and class sizes, particularly at the elementary level, that we strive for. It helps us continue the academic support systems to address areas of learning loss and to ensure a proactive approach with intervention strategies. It maintains adequate health and safety services for all students and staff. It continues to address the social and emotional and mental health needs of all students. So this would be achieving the additional adjustment counselor, achieving the academic interventionist, maintaining the additional school nurse, would all help us achieve those objectives. And then by hiring the STEM coordinator, it would help us enhance our curriculum leadership model within the district to support all educators in curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Certainly, we're going to be continuing with our technology program and our one-to-one program in grades K through 12. And it does have the funding that would properly maintain all 5 schools and surrounding campuses. So that is our presentation today. I hope everyone was able to kind of get a quick overview of what's involved in the fiscal 24 preliminary school budget in North Reading. Here are some next steps as we move through the timeline and the budget calendar. There's some key dates in April, in May as we approach the annual town meeting in June. But I hope that was helpful to everyone, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you.